Hello there, FFTCG community. I'm Judge Jared, and this is episode 13 of Rules Roundup. Good old unlucky 13. It's all right. We're here, though. Episode 13. Rules Roundup, where I go over rules questions from this week that happened in the unofficial global Discord server. And, of course, I go over these questions to give you the answers, but also as a way for you to test yourself on your rules knowledge and hopefully learn something a little bit along the way. So with that out of the way, we have 10 questions again this week, just like I've been doing the last couple times here, so you can kind of give yourself a little quiz as we go, see how you do. But before we get to those 10 questions, I have a bit of a confession to make, and that confession is, so this is not question 1 from this week. This is actually question 1 from the last episode 12. The confession here is that I answered this question last week, and I got it wrong. And so I want to go over it again because I want to give you the right answer, for one. So first reason is I want to make sure that we get the right answer out there, just for the sake of clarity and not having any misinformation. Second reason I want to go over it again is because I just want to be transparent about it. It was pointed out obviously after I put up the video, and I was like, oh yeah, nope, absolutely, I totally missed something really important there. And so I just want to be transparent, because if you're watching these, then I assume you must have some level of trust with me that I'm going to give you the right answer, and that I'm going to know what I'm talking about. I'm going to be correct in the things that I put out there. And I strive my best to do that. I absolutely have a high bar for myself of wanting to only put out correct information and make sure that I'm being a reliable source of information. And so, to be honest, it's rather embarrassing to have to point out that I messed something up and got it wrong. But I think for the sake of transparency and for helping to maintain that trust, it's important for me to point out when I did miss something, when I did make a mistake, and to correct the record there, so that it's not just me trying to pretend like I'm perfect and I didn't get anything wrong ever, right? Because I'm not perfect. I do get things wrong, and it's rather unfortunate when I get things wrong and it's recorded on camera on the internet forever. But now this is going to be recorded on camera on the internet forever, this correction here. So much like a newspaper putting out a correction, this is me putting out a correction. The question here from last time is about Shiva and Zenos. I'm going to give you the short version of it. We don't need to go over all of it again, but Zenos has this auto ability that triggers, says when a card in your opponent's break zone leaves the break zone, your opponent discards 1 card. So when a card in the opponent's break zone leaves the break zone, your opponent discards 1 card. Okay. Now, the person asking the question, they were asking about this Shiva, because this Shiva has an alternate cost, and part of the alternate cost makes it so that when you cast Shiva, after the effect resolves, instead of Shiva going to the break zone, she goes back to your hand. So the way that the person asked the question was, they were like, hey, since the Shiva is not going to the break zone before it goes back to my hand, it means that it's not going to trigger Zenos, right? And I said, yep, it's not going to trigger Zenos because the Shiva is not going to the break zone, and so it's not moving from the break zone somewhere else. It's not going to trigger Zenos. And in that, I was correct in the sense that, yeah, Shiva is not going to the break zone. So the act of it going to the break zone or not going to the break zone, the act of it going to your hand without going to the break zone means it's not going to trigger Zenos. That much of it's correct. But this is a bit of a missing the forest for the trees situation, because this extra cost for Shiva, that first line says, if you cast Shiva, you may remove 4 ice cards in your break zone from the game as an extra cost. You may remove 4 ice cards in your break zone from the game. So you're removing cards from your break zone and putting them somewhere else, which is the thing that triggers Zenos' ability. So yeah, I got so wrapped up and kind of zoomed in on the literal question being asked, which is, hey, it's not going to trigger it because Shiva is not going to the break zone before it goes back to my hand. I wasn't even thinking of the broader thing here. And so it's like I answered their question correctly without answering the situation correctly, right? Because they're asking this because they're seeing if they can do this without it triggering Zenos. And the answer is they can't do it without triggering Zenos, but it's for a different reason than they expected. It's because paying the extra cost is going to trigger Zenos. So yeah, I missed that one. and I appreciate it, people who pointed it out, because I do want to be kept honest here on things. So yeah, for those of you who commented on it or reached out or whatever to say, hey, missed this one here, appreciate that. But yeah, for the record, if you pay the extra cost for Shiva, it's going to trigger Zenos. Doesn't matter what Shiva's doing when it gets cast or whatever. You've already triggered it by the time it's been put on the stack anyway. So that's our correction. Hopefully I don't have to do a whole lot of these. I haven't had to so far. Made it, I guess, 11 episodes without having to do it. I had to do it on the 12th one, or after the 12th one. But anyway, so that's for last week. I got 9 out of 10 last week, which is not bad by itself. But when you're the person who like wrote the quiz, so to speak, or put the quiz together, not a good look to go 9 out of 10. Anyway, we're going to move on. Let's do this week's questions now. Question number 1. Does Cecil tax the second ability? That's about as short of a question as we're going to get. So Cecil here, who's kind of one of the men of the hour right now in the meta, has his auto ability. It says, when one or more characters you control are chosen by your opponent's summons or abilities, if your opponent doesn't pay 2, cancel their effects. Then we have Ultima Weapon. They're asking about the second ability on Ultima Weapon, so we're going to skip down to that second auto ability here. It says, when Ultima Weapon enters the field, if you control 4 or more water characters, your opponent selects one forward they control, put it into the break zone. So they're asking about, for that effect, does that trigger Cecil? The answer is nope, it does not trigger Cecil. And it's as simple as the fact that Ultima Weapon's second auto ability doesn't choose. And so since it doesn't choose, it doesn't trigger Cecil's auto ability. And this is just one of those kind of basic ideas that you want to really lock in as far as understanding the rules broadly. The idea here is if an effect doesn't use the word choose, it is not choosing. And it might seem obvious or simple, but just if you remember that and you're trying to figure out something like this, especially when it comes to that Cecil, that's all you need to know. If an effect doesn't use the word choose, it's not choosing. If you read through Ultima Weapon's second ability there, second auto ability, I'll read it one more time. When Ultima Weapon enters the field, if you control 4 or more water characters, your opponent selects one forward they control, put it into the break zone. Didn't use the word choose, so it's not choosing. So no, doesn't trigger Cecil. The first one does, because the first one does use the word choose, but it's an important distinction between both of the autos on Ultima Weapon. Next up, can I use this ability multiple times in the same turn to boost my attack? All right, I've got Shelke here. She's got an action ability, pretty simple action ability to be honest. It says, let's just pay 1 crystal, and then it says Shelke gains plus 3,000 power until the end of the turn. They want to know, can I do that multiple times? The answer is absolutely. You can definitely do it several times in the same turn. There's nothing written on here that tells you there's a restriction. There are a lot of abilities out there that will say they can only be used once per turn, or they can only be used on your turn, or they can only be used on a certain phase, things like that. But they're explicit when those things happen. So her ability, it just says that she gains 3,000 power till the end of the turn. So you can use it as many times as you can pay for it. Is what it comes down to, right? As long as you have crystals, then knock yourself out. Just keep on making Shelke, like, just make her buff as much as you want. We're gonna have just super buff Shelke. Yeah, you can make her with whatever pile of crystals you have to spend, knock yourself out. I'd like to see Shelke just get to absolutely absurd levels of power. All right, this next question, this person, whoever asked this is somebody after my own heart here, because we got a question about Andrea Rhodea. This is a dancer question, and as a self-described dancer aficionado, I love that I get to answer a question about dancers. They're having a bit of a moment right now. A little bit kind of along the edges of the meta. You see it popping a little bit. In particular, good old Detective John Schreiner just qualified at the Miami Materia Cup with a mono water dancers deck. Didn't use Andrea Rhodea, my recollection, but still, good for him on qualifying with a rogue deck, and also one that's just one of my favorite pet decks ever. So anyway, to the question at hand though about Andrea. It says, does Andrea Rhodea stop autos on entry? I'm inclined to believe that it works like Cuchulainn, but I wanted to get clarification. So Andrea Rhodea's first ability here, he has an action ability. It says you dull 2 active Category 7 characters, and then it says all the forwards opponent controls lose all abilities until the end of the turn. So they want to know if you can use this ability in order to stop auto abilities that trigger from when a forward enters, right? And this is one of those questions. There's a couple different ways they might be asking this, so I'm just going to cover kind of both interpretations just for the sake of being as thorough as possible. The first way they might be thinking about this is going, oh, well, let's say a forward entered, and then I want to respond by using Andrea Rhodea's ability so that they lose their abilities and then it doesn't trigger, right? So if that's what you're trying to do with Andrea here, that doesn't work, because before you even are going to have priority to be able to use Andrea Rhodea's ability, this is going to be a character that has already entered the field, and if the auto ability triggers from them entering the field, that auto ability is already triggered. It's already on the stack before you even get the opportunity to use Andrea's ability. So we're way too late there. So in that sense, yes, it is like Cuchulainn, which is that if you tried to respond to something entering with Cuchulainn and remove its abilities, it's not going to stop anything that already triggered. So if it's an auto ability that triggers from entering, we're way too late. Now, the other way they might be asking this question, I don't think this is what they meant, but I'll cover it. The other way is the effect says all the forwards opponent controls lose all abilities till the end of the turn. They might be thinking of it as, hey, what if I already resolved this ability, right? So it's resolved it. We have this ongoing effect. Well, actually, the thing is, it's not an ongoing effect. Maybe they think it's an ongoing effect, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. We have this effect that happened, and they're thinking, oh, well, since they lost their abilities, now when they play a forward, the forward's going to come in with no abilities, right? And that's not the case. That would be really cool for dancers, I guess. Probably wouldn't be very cool broadly for the rules, but yeah, it's not going to make it so everything they control loses its abilities. It's only going to hit whatever forwards they control at the time that this ability resolves, right? So when it resolves, it's going to make them lose all their abilities until the end of the turn. I guess it is an ongoing effect, I think, because it's an ongoing effect that continues till the end of the turn. Can you tell that it's after 11 p.m. for me? So yeah, that bit of it got a little bit wrapped up on the effect bit. But anyway, the point is, it's only going to stop, or only going to remove the abilities of the forwards that the player controls when this ability resolves. So it's not going to like preemptively remove the abilities from other forwards that they might play that turn. All right, next up here we have a question that says, something I wasn't sure about since I'm pretty new to the game. After the dice roll, coin flip, etc., do you decide to go first or second before drawing your opening hand or mulligan, or after you draw your cards? This is a great question. I love this question because this is something that happens literally every game, right? Every game of FFCG, you have to go through this process of, some randomized way of figuring out who's going first, or I guess if you're in Top Cut, it's not randomized, but a way of determining who goes first. And then after that, doing your opening hand and mulligan and stuff. And so the question here is, what happens like first? Do you do your opening hand and then decide, or do you decide and then do your opening hand? And what happens here is you do have to make your decision before you see your opening hand. So you don't get to look at your opening hand and go, second, right? You have to make the decision after the random or not random method has been used to determine who's going first. And then after that's been determined, then you draw your opening hands and then do the mulligan. I'm going to go a step further on this question, though, because there's something that I think a lot of people are not aware of, and I want to just kind of maybe spread some awareness on this. So when you do your opening hands, right, there's always that point in time before you actually start the first turn where both players confirm whether they are keeping their opening hand or whether they're going to do a mulligan, right? And the thing I think people are not aware of is that there's actually a specific order to that procedure, which is that the player who's going to go first, they have to say first whether they are whether they're going to keep their hand or mulligan, right? And then after they've declared that, Then the player is going to go second, declares whether they are going to keep their hand or mulligan. And this can be super important because maybe your decision on whether you're keeping your hand or not, if you're the person who's going second, maybe your decision is going to be based off of, well, at least in some part, off of whether your opponent kept their hand or not, right? Maybe if they keep their hand, you're like, oh, my hand I feel kind of about, but they kept theirs, so they must like it, which means I should probably not gamble on this hand. I'm going to go ahead and mulligan. Or maybe if your opponent mulliganed, you're like, okay, well, they're rolling the dice again. Maybe I'll roll the dice again on getting a better hand, right? So just be aware of that if you're the person who's going to be going second, absolutely the way you're supposed to do it is to wait until the person who goes first has declared what they're doing, and then you declare what you're doing as far as keeping your hand or mulligan. So like I said, I think a lot of people don't know that. I usually see things pretty casual as far as just people will kind of say it in whatever order. They're not really making sure to do it one or the other, but there's an importance to the structure of things there. So just be aware that if you're the person who's going second, just chill. Even if you know exactly what you're going to do, just chill. Because also, I guess the other flip side of it is that if you are the person going second and you announce what you're going to do before the first person has made their decision and declared it, that might affect their decision as well, right? So just hang tight if you're the person going second. Wait till they've committed, say what they're going to do, and then go ahead and mention what you're going to do. Anyway, little side trip there on them. This question is, if I Clive Prime into Ifrit, Opus 26, on the same turn, can the Ifrit attack immediately since the bottom part is haste? This is a question that we can actually get now that we have this new Ifrit. So they're asking, they've played Clive, and then on the same turn, right after playing Clive, I assume, they're going to prime into Ifrit, and they want to know if now they can attack with Ifrit. And they're saying their kind of justification is, can they attack with him because Clive, has haste? And the answer is no. You cannot attack with Ifrit in that situation. This question, like I said, is only possible now because we have this new one, because the original Ifrit 16 has haste. So it didn't really matter what Clive had or didn't have, because it was just written, just stamped right on there on the 7 CP Ifrit 16 that it has haste. So you're not going to have haste. And the reason for that is because when a character primes, every bit of the printed stuff on their card gets replaced with whatever the card is that's being put on top, with the exception of their original card game. I always say card game by accident. Card name. The original card name gets kept in addition to the new card name, but otherwise they are their stats, like everything, all their game text is whatever the card is on top, except you just sneak in that little extra card name with it, right? So because of that, that means that this primed Clive doesn't have haste anymore. He doesn't have any of his abilities that he had before, right? He is a Ifrit now, but just tagging along that card name, but he is a Ifrit. So you're not gonna be able to attack with him. If you had already controlled him for a full turn, or if you had controlled him since the beginning of your turn continuously, and then you primed, then you can attack. But that has nothing to do with haste. That's just because of the rules around attacking and how priming works and stuff. You would not be able to just play Clive, prime the same turn, and then attack with a free. Doesn't work. Now, since we're talking about priming, you know what time it is? You have any idea? Any idea what time it is? It's shameless plug time. Because the first video that I put out doing rule stuff is about priming. It's all about priming. In fact, it's a video called Judge Jared Explains Priming. So, if you need any reminders on priming, or if you just want to, if you haven't watched this video yet and you just want to dive into things maybe you didn't think about with priming, you should go watch that. And if you have watched it, thank you. But also, you can go back and watch it again, right? Refresh yourself, things like that. But since somebody mentioned priming, I feel like obligated to do the shameless plug. So, you can go watch that. On to the next question, though. It's Clive. He's back. He's back, but he's different. May I ask, for new Clive, it says he has the ability of Icon that's in Graveyard and Banished Zone, May I ask which type of ability he will inherit? Now, for those of you who don't speak Magic, they're asking about cards that are icons that are in the break zone or the remove from play zone. Because this field ability on this new Clive that's been spoiled, you can see there it says Clive gains all the special abilities of the job icon that you own removed from the game. So now it specifically does say removed from the game, right? So this question, they mentioned Graveyard and Banished Zone, but they were referring to Break Zone and removed from Play Zone. So first off, anything that's in the Break Zone, Clive ain't going to get it. Not good enough for his ability here. His ability is only about things that have been removed from the game, right? About icons that have been removed from the game. So just first off the bat, make sure that we're not trying to give him special abilities from icons that are in the Break Zone. Now, as far as what types of abilities he's going to inherit, they're called special abilities. Special abilities are pretty obvious. They're the most visually obvious ones to notice because they, for one, they have a name, like a specific name to the ability. That name is in like kind of gold or orange. I never really know exactly what color it is, but it looks kind of orangish to me. So like orangish, bold italicized text that's got the name of the ability, right? No other abilities get that sort of treatment, so that's a special ability. And of course, they always have the S cost as part of the costs of activating it. So those things we're going to tell you that those are special abilities. Now, just to make that clear, we're going to take a quick look at what special abilities that we have so far in the game. And as of the time that I'm making this video, these are the icons that we have that have special abilities. So you have Ifrit with Spit Flare, you have Odin with Iron Flash, the new Shiva with Ice Age, and Bahamut with Zeta Flare. Now, it seems like we're getting a new complete set of dominance and icons in this set. So there's probably going to be more than these 4 by the time the full set's spoiled, but these are the 4 that we have right now. So if you had all 4 of these cards in your remove from play zone, then that Clive, when he's on the field, he's going to have all 4 of those special abilities. He's going to have Spit Flare and Iron Flash and Ice Age and Zeta Flare. So that's what he gains. And again, this is not part of the question that was asked, but I feel like it's the natural follow-up, just to make sure that we're all on the same page about things. 3 out of the 4 of these abilities here, the only cost is the S cost. There's no dulling, there's no CP cost, whatever, just an S cost, right? And of course, all special abilities have an S cost. So it's worth pointing out that the S cost needs to be paid with, now this is Clive's ability, so because it's Clive's ability that he's gained, you need to discard a copy of card name Clive to use these abilities that he has gained, all right? So if we get too excited, if you have that Clive in play and you draw another copy of Odin, you can't just discard the Odin to use Iron Flash special ability because Clive is not card name Odin. So just make sure that we're using this card correctly. You need to be discarding a card named Clive to use any of those special abilities that he's gained. As a side note, it also seems like they were pretty smart in their planning on this because all the specials we have so far don't use any specific CP, right? Even the one that uses CP, which is Shiva, it uses just generic CP instead of being ice specific. So I feel like they thought that one out, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so those special abilities there, he's going to gain those, and make sure you're discarding a Clive in order to use them. Next up, we have, if I have Auron and Charlotte on my field, my opponent wouldn't be able to target my board with abilities and summons, and the only way to remove it is with things that don't target, right? This is one of these clever questions. This is somebody going, I think I found like a little corner of the rules where I've just like trapped him, right? I've put up the impenetrable wall, because both Auron and Charlotte have this field ability. In the case of Auron, it's summons and abilities of your opponent must choose Auron if possible. And then Charlotte, the same exact thing, but with her name. Summons and abilities of your opponent must choose Charlotte if possible. So the thinking here in this question is they're going, well, when I have Auron out by himself with other forwards, his ability says that that he has to be chosen, right? Other forwards can't be chosen. He needs to be chosen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Charlotte out, and Charlotte says that she needs to be chosen, right? So Charlotte needs to be chosen, and Auron needs to be chosen. And so because of that, now they can't choose anything, right? Because they can't choose both with the same effect. So, nothing can be chosen, right? That's not how it works, though. That's it's not it's funny. Like I said, it's clever, it's interesting, and I like people trying to find little corners of rules to sneak in things there. But this is not going to work out the way that you think. And the crux of this is those last two words in the abilities. It says if possible, right? If possible. So part of this is that even if whether it was only one of them on the field or both of them on the field, they're not always a valid target for things, right? If you have like a wind effect that says choose a forward of cost 5 or more, break it, then they're not a valid target for that in the first place. So if you had a forward of cost 5 or more, they can still be chosen because Auron can't be chosen by it, right? If possible means like if it's something that can normally choose him. Now having both of them there, what happens is if you cast something that can choose either Auron or Charlotte and it only chooses one target, then the person who cast it or used the ability, they get to choose. They can choose either Auron or Charlotte, right? Because they can't meet the requirement of choosing both of them if it only chooses one forward, but they can just pick, right? So they're not prevented from doing it entirely because they can't pick both with the same effect, but they actually get the choice of which one of them they want to target with the effect. If there was an effect that chose two forwards and both Auron and Charlotte were eligible, for example, the new Light Yuna, if she was using her ability to choose two forwards and dull them, then you would be forced to choose both Auron and Charlotte, right? You would have to choose both of those to satisfy the requirements, and then they'd get dulled. If you had an effect that chose 3 forwards, for example, the old 4 CP Shiva that like chooses 3 forwards and you dull and freeze them, in that case you would have to choose Auron, you would have to choose Charlotte, and then you could choose whatever you wanted for the third one, because the whole point here is that when there's an effect that says, or rather when their ability says they need to be chosen, that means that the effect needs to choose them, and then beyond that you can choose whatever else with it. As long as you've met the requirement that you've chosen them, you can do whatever else with the rest of that effect. So if it chooses 3 forwards and you chose Auron, you chose Charlotte, okay, you fulfilled your requirements, and now you can do whatever you want with the third one. So yeah, it's not gonna be this impenetrable barrier the way that you might think from just throwing out Auron and Charlotte at the same time. Yeah, it gives an extra layer to it, right? Now they have to remove both Auron and Charlotte before they can start targeting other forwards with a single target thing. But really, it's just having that extra layering as opposed to being this sort of, now nothing can be chosen at all. Haha. So, anyway, next question. The X-Burst, does it do the search for free, or are you still required to discard? So we've got Elfe here, and they're asking about Elfe's X-Burst, which can do a search here. Now, I guess if I read it, it's going to be, when Elfe enters the field, you may discard 1 card. If you do so, search for 1 job avalanche operative and add it to your hand. So the first thing we want to just be aware of in order to answer this question of whether you get to search for free or if you're required to discard, just remember that every auto ability has 2 to 3 parts to it. It's going to have the trigger event, and it's going to have the effect. Those are the 2 it's always going to have. Trigger event and effect. And those are going to be separated by a comma. And then it might have a condition on it. So if it has a condition, then the order is going to be trigger event, comma, condition, comma, effect. Right? Now here, we only have that 1 comma. There's no condition on this. So when we have an X-Burst, what happens is the X-Burst just ignores the trigger event entirely. It says, forget the trigger event, we're overriding it, it's happening, right? We don't have to worry about that because the X-Burst is now just like replacing the trigger event. So all you have to worry about is the effect. So for the case of Elfe, now if this is triggered as an X-Burst, we're ignoring everything up to the comma, but we're not ignoring anything after that point. Including if it was a conditional auto ability, we would still have to worry about the condition. But so we're ignoring the trigger event, everything up to the first comma. So that means the ability now just reads as, you may discard 1 card. If you do so, search for 1 job avalanche operative and add it to your hand. So the answer to this question is the search is not free. You still have to discard a card. And then, yes, are you still required to discard? Yes. So the effect still happens the way that it's written. All that we're replacing with the X burst is what would normally cause it to trigger. Which we have to do that because the vast majority of X bursts are when so-and-so enters the field. And if they're going to the damage zone, they're obviously not entering the field. So, yeah, that's how it works there. So just ignore everything up to the first comma for X bursts when it's an auto ability, and then do everything else. Hi, there's a lot of confusion about the new Lightning and new Serah from Opus 26. How many forwards can Serah break when she enters by Lightning ability and the party does damage? Some people say Serah triggers 2, some 1, some 3. So we got a couple of new cards here from Opus 26. We have, first is the Lightning, and she's got 2, okay, technically she has 3 abilities. First one's Haste, but she's got 2 busier abilities, let's call them. The first is a field ability. It says, if lightning forming a party deals damage to your opponent, the damage becomes 2 instead. Pretty straightforward there. The second one is the auto ability. It says, when lightning attacks, you may play one category 13 forward of cost 6 or less from your hand onto the field dull, forming a party with lightning and attacking. You can play a forward of any element. And then at the end of the turn, return it to its owner's hand. Now that auto ability, that's a whole new set of business right there. There's a whole lot of things about that, but we're going to keep focused on the question here for the moment, which is how that interacts with Serah. So the thing about Serah, this is the first time I've had a question for a card that we do not have the English image of yet. And so if you're watching this, chances are you don't read Japanese. So I'm going to give you the translation on what Serah does, just so that you can see it, and also maybe you're not familiar with the card yet. So Serah has an auto ability and an action ability. The auto ability says, when Serah enters the field or deals damage to your opponent, choose one forward of cost 4 or less your opponent controls. If you control 2 or more category 13 forwards, break it. Then we have an action ability, cost 0, says if you control 3 or more category 13 forwards, deal 1 damage to your opponent. You can only use this ability during your turn and once per turn. So the question they're asking is that we've got Lightning, she's attacked, her effect went on the stack. When it resolved, they played Serah onto the field. Serah now is on the field, forming a forming a party with Lightning and attacking. And then presuming that they don't get blocked, then they're going to deal damage. And that damage, because of Lightning's field ability, the damage is going to become 2 damage. So they're asking, how many times does Serah's auto ability trigger here, right? Going back to what I was just talking about in the previous question about auto abilities and how they're phrased, right? We have trigger event, comma, possibly a condition in there, comma, effect. If we look at the way that hers is written, we have the triggered condition, or trigger event is when Serah enters the field or deals damage to your opponent. There's our comma. So that's our trigger event. Then choose one forward of cost 4 or less your opponent controls. So no condition on this one, right? We only had the 1 comma there. And then there's more to it, obviously. It says, now there is an if you control 2 or more, but that's not a condition. In the English language, you might think, wait, no, that's a condition. You definitely need to control 2. But from a rules perspective, this is not a conditional auto, because a conditional auto ability would check if you control the right amount of forwards, both when it goes on the stack and when it resolves. And a condition needs to be in that position I was talking about. It needs to be right after the trigger event, and it's not here. So there's some important nuanced differences here in terms of the placement of where they have things. So it does say if you control 2 or more, then break it. So there is something kind of like a requirement, but it's not in the rules sense a conditional auto ability. So anyway, the trigger event. It's when Serah enters the field or deals damage to your opponent. So let's break down here what's happening as far as how many times this ability is going to trigger. So we had Lightning attack, and then her ability resolved. We played Serah to the field. When Serah entered the field from Lightning's ability resolving, she enters the field, and Serah's auto ability triggers at that point, because one of the trigger events for her is when she enters the field. All right, so ding, that's our first instance here. Triggers, and then assuming that nothing happened to either one of them, you do control 2 category 13 forwards because you have Lightning and Serah. So you'll be able to choose a forward of cost 4 or less the opponent controls and break it. So yeah, that's our first instance of getting to choose something and break it. Now, assuming that nothing blocked them, they deal the damage, they're going to deal 2 damage. And so I think this is the crux of their question, is that because you're dealing 2 damage as a result of Lightning's field ability, they're like, well, wait, is Serah going to trigger twice for this, or is she going to trigger once for this? When the damage gets dealt, even though it's 2 damage, it's only going to trigger Serah's auto ability 1 time, right? So the second kind of possible trigger event here is or when Serah deals damage to your opponent. It's going to trigger 1 time. And some of you are probably thinking, well, wait, I'm dealing 2 damage, right? I'm dealing 2 damage. So why is this only triggering once? And the reason it's only triggering once is because the trigger event is her dealing damage. It's not based on how much damage she deals, but her dealing damage to the opponent. And this is only one event happening here, dealing the damage. And perhaps a way to get you to understand why dealing 2 damage here doesn't count as dealing damage twice is think of the way that it works when we're dealing damage to forwards. Okay, so if we have a forward that has an auto ability that triggers from having damage dealt to it, let's say Ferris, right? We have Fire Ferris. If she's dealt damage by an ability or summon of the opponent's, actually no, not even of the opponent's, it's just in general when she's dealt damage. When she's dealt damage, then triggers her auto ability, right? Her auto ability triggers 1 time regardless of how much damage she receives. Doesn't matter if it's 1,000 damage, doesn't matter if it's 7,000 damage, doesn't matter if it's 20,000 damage. It's 1 instance of her receiving damage, but there is a variable on how much damage she's receiving, but there's only 1 instance of her actually receiving damage. And that's what's happening here with the trigger for Serah's ability, which is that she's dealing damage 1 time, but the amount of damage being dealt is 2. So the variable there is how much damage is being dealt, but it's only 1 instance of damage that happens to deal 2 points. This is different than, for example, Fire Lightning Y'shtola, who has a trigger event that says when a player receives a point of damage. In that scenario, when you deal more than 1 point of damage in an attack, that will trigger Y'shtola multiple times, however many times you received points of damage. But that's because the way it's phrased is different. It's for receiving a point of damage, which is the act of putting the card into the damage zone, as opposed to the instance of dealing damage to your opponent. So again, kind of very in the weeds nuance there, but just to make sure to cover everything there. So to recap, we had 1 trigger of Serah's auto ability when she entered, and then we had a second trigger when she dealt damage. So you would, for the second time, you get to choose an opponent's forward cost 4 or less and break it. It's worth pointing out, in all this discussion, I haven't even gotten back to her action ability here, which if you controlled a third 13 forward, you can also use her action ability to deal a point of damage to the opponent. And if she's still on the field when that point of damage gets dealt, when that action ability resolves, then yep, you better believe that's going to trigger that auto ability again. So if we count that in there, using the action ability on the same turn, then you can get 3 triggers of her auto ability. 1 for entering, 1 for dealing a point of damage, and then a third one for doing the action ability, which deals another point of damage. Okay. Now, I mostly focus on Serah here, but of course this is a question about lightning and how lightning works. And so, you know what time it is? Guess what? It's that time again. It's shameless plug time, because last week I made a video all about this lightning because she's got a weird effect that does new stuff that we've never seen before, and there's all sorts of questions that popped up from it. So, shameless plug is you should go watch that video called Let's Talk About Lightning, where I talk all about lightning and about the newness of her effect there of playing a forward in and having it enter, attacking, and forming a party, and all the different things that means and doesn't mean and all that. So yeah, highly recommend you check that out. If lightning ends up being meta-ish at all next set, you're going to want to know how things work there. So anyway, shameless plug number 2 for this episode. But that leads us to our final question for today. Final question is, when your opponent casts/plays on a character I control, waits until the casted card is successful and any resulting effects or abilities are placed on the stack before triggering and being placed on the stack, correct? Even if the opponent decides to hold priority, it would still be waiting to go on the stack before they add anything else, correct? This is, in my opinion, this is not the most clear question as to what, like, understanding the situation, what they're asking. So I'm going to try to distill it down to what I believe they're asking. So I picked Len to put on here as an example because she has a pretty straightforward auto ability that fits within the framework of what they're asking, which her auto ability says, when your opponent casts a summon, activate Len. Okay, so they're asking about auto abilities that trigger off of the opponent casting or playing something. So we're going to use Len for the example here. So they're saying the opponent cast a card, and they're saying, does the card have to finish being cast, or does the ability have to finish being placed on the stack, depending on kind of what auto ability we're talking about here? Does that need to go on the stack before these whatever triggered auto abilities get put on the stack? And also, do these triggered auto abilities get put on the stack before or after they pass priority? Like, are they able to add more stuff before this gets added on here? So let me give you the example that I think should cover this. Let's say your opponent cast Amaterasu, right? They cast Amaterasu on something. And so remember, for casting, something is considered to be cast after you have gone through all of the declaring it and paying for it. And in the case of a summon, putting it on the stack, right? Then it's been cast. So auto abilities, they always trigger exactly when the trigger event happens. There's a difference between when something triggers and when something gets put on the stack. Those are two different events. When something triggers, when something goes on the stack. So a trigger always happens immediately. And all that means is that it's just floating out there waiting for its turn to go on the stack, but it's already out there, right? It has basically left the character that it came from. I like to think of it as this is a firework that has been launched but has not exploded yet, right? So it went poof, and it's up in the air. It has not exploded yet, hasn't done its thing, but it's already gone, right? It's already in process, basically. We're waiting for the effect to happen. So that's what's happening here, is that as soon as the trigger event happens, then poof, it's been launched, but we're waiting for it to go on the stack and then resolve. So the triggering is going to happen immediately, but not the putting it on the stack. So they cast Amaterasu. Amaterasu gets put on the stack. And then, depending on whose turn it is, either you or the opponent is about to gain priority again. And then before you gain priority again, you're going to put any auto abilities that triggered onto the stack. And the way this always works is that whoever the turn player is, the active player, they're going to put any auto abilities that they have that triggered onto the stack first, followed by the non-active player, the person whose turn it is not, putting any auto abilities they have on the stack. And when each player, if they have multiple of their own auto abilities, they can put it on the stack in whatever order they like. But it's always active player puts theirs on first, and then non-active player puts theirs on top here. So assuming that nothing else triggered, we cast that Amaterasu, triggered Len, and then at that point, before whichever player is about to gain priority, the Len needs to be put on the stack. Len gets put on the stack, and then now whoever's turn it is, they have priority after that, right? Or I guess actually whoever had priority beforehand, I should specify there. So that's part of their question is they're saying if they hold priority, when would this go on? It still has to go on while they're holding priority. So if it was their turn and they cast the Amaterasu, trigger your Len, okay, they want to do something else perhaps, but before that, the Len gets put on the stack on top of the Amaterasu, and now it's back to them having priority and they can do whatever else, right? So hopefully that all made sense. But basically the takeaways to remember here is that an auto ability always triggers immediately, but it has to wait until a player gains priority or is about to gain priority in order for it to go on the stack. And that even when a player is holding priority, before they get to add something else, we are forced to put the auto abilities that triggered onto the stack. You don't just get to keep adding to the stack while these auto abilities are waiting to get added on, and then when you pass priority, then they go on. It's not how it works. They need to go on kind of at the first opportunity after they've triggered, and that opportunity is when somebody gains priority again, which in the case of somebody holding priority, they gain priority again after the thing they've cast has gone on the stack. So yeah, that's how all that works. Anyway, that was the final question for today. And other than a couple little verbal flubs I had in there, I feel pretty good about not having screwed up any questions this week. So hopefully I'm not going to be starting off next episode with, hey, here's another one I messed up and I got to come back to it. I feel pretty good about this though. So yeah, thank you for watching this far. We've got the Toronto Materia Cup coming up, I believe, this weekend. And so if you are on your way out there, or if you're there right now while you're watching this, then hello and good luck to you out there. Toronto is potentially the last Materia Cup in North America before the new set comes out. That's a whole separate discussion, but it's kind of up in the air whether or not the legality of Opus 26 is going to line up with Portland, but that's probably a discussion for another day. This is already long enough here. But yeah, so good luck to those of you at the Materia Cup if you're watching this that weekend. And if you have any questions for me, or you want to just reach out for any reason, then you can find me on YouTube. I am at youtube.com/@JudgeJared. That's my channel. Facebook, it's facebook.com/JudgeJared. On Twitter, you can find me. I am at JudgeJaredFFTCG. And on Discord, my username is JudgeJared. So you can find me in all four of those places to try to ask things or just share your thoughts. Earlier this week, I put out another video that was kind of me musing on and answering some questions about why I haven't made any content about doing the job of judging. So if that's something you haven't watched it and you just kind of want to see my thoughts on that and why I focus more on the rules stuff than on the judging side so far, then you can go check that out. And I already plugged the priming video and the lightning video, so got those two. And obviously this is episode 13 of Rules Roundup, so you got, if you haven't watched all of them, there's some more you can go back and watch there. But I should stop rambling. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here and for the likes and comments and all that, but mostly thank you for watching. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video. So I'm Judge Jared, and until next time, court is adjourned.